This feels very legitimate with the fact that I can walk around, so it'll take some getting used to. I'll start here at the computer. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rob Longiaru. I am a conservation biologist with the Town of Hempstead, Department of Conservation and Waterways. We're going to talk about some research on the local black skimmer populations on Long Island, most notably in the Town of Hempstead. This research was a collaboration with the Town of Hempstead, University of Oklahoma, Larrard Research and Conservation. We had funding from the Nassau County Soil and Water Conservation District as well, along with many volunteers and other partners that I will thank now and again later, because this project and the where it's led to would not be possible without the different collaborators, which is why I think I'm here today. I think to get everyone here to understand that, I think we all know that conservation doesn't have boundaries, and just because I work for local government doesn't mean that our research and what's going on at our site doesn't affect others, not only on Long Island, but across the entire Atlantic Flyway. So this is kind of like a two-part presentation here where I'm going to talk a little bit about the local, which I think everyone here can relate to, but then also the broader research goals of this project, which also include the long-term strategies of this species. Just in general, coastal ecosystems are dynamic, complex, fragile, and capable of resiliency. I think we all know how important our waterways, our watersheds, and the coastline that we all live in, how important they are to not only our way of lives, but also how wildlife and the ecosystems work alongside that. So just a factoid, by 2050, at least half of the world's population of 8 billion people will be located within 50 miles of a global coastline. So we all know how congested Long Island can be and most of the Atlantic coast can be. So what does that mean for conservation? Obviously that means we have a role to understand our impact to any sort of species or ecosystem as a whole. So that's kind of the broader idea on why we're looking at an individual species, as well those individual species connect with the larger ecosystem that is well beyond just Long Island. So in terms of our skimmer research and goal, advanced collaborative research that will pioneer movement research with a focus towards coastal species conservation and management to further improve adaptive management and conservation strategies for species of concern. That is wordy, that sounds like a lot, but it's really about understanding new ways to monitor populations of, in this case, birds. Some of my slides got a little cut off, you'll figure it out. What can we use? What can the use of science and technology bring to conservation? So a lot of us are very familiar with monitoring and data collection and all those low-level things that we do to check the box for our regulators, especially for shorebird management. But using technology and advanced practices to better understand what populations of, in this case, black skimmer are doing, have kind of shed new light or confirmed, denied field studies for many years. A lot of the studies on these species are in the field, visual surveys, camera trap surveys. So how can we use laboratory functions and also technology to understand these species better? Specifically for our study, telemetry is very important. GPS telemetry is kind of the purpose behind, or what we did specifically in this project, which I'll get more to in a little bit. But I want to transition just briefly on the work that we do in New York and skimmer in New York, especially Long Island. And again, why does local government care? I work for local government. There's a lot across Long Island, a lot of different jurisdictions, but the Town of Hempstead is very different from many other jurisdictions within Long Island. The Town of Hempstead is the most populous township in the country, with close to 800,000 residents. For comparison, if the Town of Hempstead was a city, a major city, it would sit somewhere between, between Seattle and San Francisco in terms of population. It encompasses most of Nassau County, South Shore of Long Island, and is, the largest township in America. We also own 20,000 acres of salt marsh, the entire bay bottom, and 180 miles of coastal waterways. We also have an established environmental department since the 1960s, staffed with biologists and others like myself. The department maintains a water quality data set that goes back over 65 years now. And part of that long-term data set is the reason we got into studying skimmer and other species a little more in depth, to try to connect some of these local issues which the layperson, a regular resident of the town of Hempstead, is probably more familiar with water quality issues than they are with, well, how many skimmer nest in Lido Beach? But how can we connect those two things in terms of creating management change in our local waterways? And we manage one of the last few remaining skimmer colonies in New York as a whole, and ours is the largest, which puts some pressure on our site as a whole. We'll get into skimmer and how they nest in a moment, but for those who don't know, they are a colony nester, very similar to least terns and common terns and roseate terns that we see on Long Island all over the place. Black skimmer you might see, but you may not know where they nest, and most of that is because there's very few colonies remaining on Long Island. So this little snippet is from Berger Gotchfield in 1990, describing some of the historic colonies, and down there is not shown or several other colonies. So you could see back in the early 2000s, there were close to a dozen or more active colonies across Long Island. That has since reduced by half. The number of skimmers themselves has varied over time, which I'll show in a moment. It's listed as special concern in New York. There's been proposed listing increase to threatened, something that we've been involved with the state, trying to really make a case for this species, because not necessarily because of their pair numbers, but actually because of the number of active sites. So putting all your eggs in one basket, no pun intended, creates a situation that is risky. So again, here are the Atlantic Coast breeding pairs. The orange is actually just the Nickerson site, Lido Beach, which is what we manage at the town of Hempstead. And somewhere in 2008, 2009, our site became the crown jewel of black skimmer nesting on Long Island, and we've taken pretty much a 75% or more slice of the pie. So as you can see, their numbers have kind of fluctuated up and down, but they've actually been doing well for the last 5, 6, 7 years. But again, that slice of the pie puts a lot of pressure on our site. All it takes is one bad year or a political change, or who knows, anything can affect these birds. We know that. These are open systems. There's many variables that are preventing nesting or preventing success, and that's part of the research we wanted to do, better understand why these birds are choosing Nickerson Beach and Lido Beach in the town of Hempstead with 800,000 people and a very heavily recreated beach. Why are they dealing with that sort of pressure, that sort of stress, that sort of risk to rear their young and try to be successful? So if you're not familiar with Hempstead Bay, we are on Long Beach Island. To the east is Jones Beach Island. This is Jones Inlet in between. And Hempstead Bay is all-encompassing and all owned by the town of Hempstead. So in the circle there is the actual nesting site. It's about a 10-acre site of a mix between recreational beach and also early successional habitat, in which we maintain in the winter season for plover and tern and all the nesting shorebirds, to actually create this early successional habitat that is inviting to these species to actually manage the beach in a way where the birds nest where the birds want to nest, and the people can still use the habitat in the way they want to recreate. So it's been a management strategy that we've done for many decades here at the town, and has been widely successful in that we know from a biological standpoint that the site fidelity of these species is very high. They want to come back to these same sites, so why not create an environment that they want to come back to, which actually limits the management perils that we have to deal with in terms of dealing with the public and folks who want to use it for other reasons. So I've met many, many different people from all over the world coming to Nickerson Beach to photograph, view, visit the skimmer, and that's a case we've made for many years in terms of management. Is not everyone wants to just go to the beach to drink a beer and jump in the water. There's a whole slew of people who want it for that ecological benefit. A little on black skimmer and their biology. There are actually 3 subspecies across the Americas. Kate Goodenough, Dr. Kate Goodenough, who was our primary researcher in this project out of the University of Oklahoma, specializes in movement ecology, and especially in Larid species, in gulls, terns, and skimmers. She has done research all across the Amazon, the West Coast, and now the Atlantic Flyway. That was kind of like her last subspecies. So kind of interesting to have like the guru of Black Skimmer in terms of someone who's seen these subpopulations and seen their differences, and there's morphological differences between these subspecies, which is really cool. But we also wanted to figure out, do they interact? Is there interaction? How did this situation come about that we have 3 subspecies? That's not really for today, but just more food for thought that these subspecies are different. From Kate herself, the birds at the Amazon are almost twice the size. They're massive. Their bills are massive, and they have a completely different life strategy based on the habitat they're in. But they are dependent on the same types of habitat, these estuarine habitats, inshore habitats. They have a unique foraging strategy. If you notice, the skimmer's lower mandible is a bit longer than their top mandible, which allows them a very unique feeding strategy where they just open their bill and go based off of touch. They open the bill, skim the surface. As soon as they feel contact, they close that bill and retrieve their food item. Size, there is dimorphism. Males are larger than females. Sight fidelity, like many shorebirds and larrids, is very, very strong. We've done a banding for over 15 years on chicks and adults, and we're still to this day seeing these same birds return to the same site. Not much else here. And they arrive about mid-May, late May, and they're here kind of later and later each year. We've seen a shift over the last 15 years where these birds kind of arrive later and nest later into the summer season, and we've had birds here as late as Columbus Day with rearing chicks. So that's another kind of thing we've brought up to the state and the feds, is that these windows are changing for some of these surveys, and we have species that are actually adapting to those sorts of change, where fall seems to come later and later each year, and these birds are able to have a food source into almost November now. So that it's more food for thought, but it is something noticeable. So to get into our research a bit, there's really 2 phases of this research, and one was really concentrated on the local and what they're doing while they're here breeding. How are they utilizing the bay? How are they being successful based off that? How far are they traveling for food? What sort of food are they bringing back? And how can we characterize this to better understand or connect that to our water quality, which is a data set, like I said, we've had for many years. So we could actually compare and contrast conditions based off success, and those are some of the local problems that we're looking to solve, or at least shed more light on. And then the second part of our research has been tracking overwintering patterns, migration patterns, and what's going on when they're not here. These seasonal shorebirds that nest here for a very short time are gone for 8 months out of the year, and we say, all right, hope you come back. And I've gone to conferences in Florida and heard from them what's going on in the wintertime there. What kind of problems do they have, and how do they connect with problems that we have, stresses, et cetera. So we'll get into that a little more. Some methods that we used was GPS telemetry was the most kind of groundbreaking aspect of this project, but chick provisioning surveys is something we were doing even before this project, which is a field activity, and SIA modeling using stable isotopes to understand diet characterization will help us understand how the animal is using the environment itself. So our objectives for the local aspect is collecting data on forage movements of nesting skimmer via GPS telemetry, characterizing diet, and using provision surveys to collaborate with isotope analyses, and modeling resource selection to develop the relationship between water quality and skimmer movements during the breeding season. So that's kind of our end goal, is we want to take all this data that we collect, understand their diet, their movements, where they're going, and their successes, and tie that into our water quality and say, this is why they're here. This is why they're utilizing this area. One of the priorities for greater protection of this species is to understand the relationship between foraging ecology, habitat availability, and impacts to reproductive success. So we've mostly been focused on the reproductive success. As site managers, we do the liquid count. We're trying to understand how successful they are, or unsuccessful they are. Do they rear young? Do they not rear young? How many do that? How many are nesting, non-nesting? What's the size of the colony? So that's the stuff we've been doing for 20, 30 years as these birds have been here. But some of the newer stuff is understanding that forage ecology and the habitat availability over time. A little bit in the methods on how we actually put GPS on adult black skimmers. It's kind of a method that Kate herself came up with working in the Amazon on how do we catch a nesting bird that just wants to sit on its eggs. It's not a chick, it's very different. We do chick banding and it's a big roundup. You create a big pen, you corral them, and then we band 100 birds at a time. Capturing individual adults, much different. We actually have to actively find a full clutch nest, 3-egg nest, and actually put these noose carpets around the nest. These are actually like small chicken wire grating, and with that is just braided fishing line. And we make these little slip knots all across, cover them up in the sand. So this is actually a real view of a nest. You can see the 2 eggs in the corner. And basically the adult skimmer will walk back, get tripped on one of these, and then you have to run in and grab the adult. So we captured 48 breeding adults across 3 or 4 years. We collected morphometrics. We collected blood samples, feather samples for stable isotopes and genetics research. We deployed these data loggers across many years. We put them on their back with a leg loop system that Kate herself kind of pioneered and created a system because they have a very unique foraging strategy and a pretty long bill. So if you just wrap it around them, good chance they're going to pry it off. But it's been very successful the way it's on. It is able to withstand their forage strategy, so it's definitely because the tools are expensive, as we know. The technology is expensive and is new, so we were able to catch all these birds over a several-year span. We were actually able even to retrieve failed transmitters over time. They have a pretty short lifespan, anywhere from 12 to 24 months. They have a solar panel on them, and they last only so long. They're continuously taking data. We were actually able to identify birds that maybe their transmitter was no longer working, but we knew they were on site, and we actually recaptured about 6 or 7 adults over the last 3 years, took the transmitter off, which is great because now we had it on hand and could actually judge, well, did our leg loop system work? Did the piece of equipment actually stand up to the salt water or whatever, or the seawater, et cetera? And is there any more data on here that maybe the receiver that we have remotely wasn't capturing? And we were actually able to send those back to the company. They refurbished those. They downloaded all the extra data that maybe we didn't get, and we actually put them out on new birds. And maybe you get another year out of these $3,000 transmitters that otherwise would have dropped off or you never would have seen them again. And I'm sure the skimmer itself was very grateful that we took this little backpack off them. This is some preliminary results from our first few years of data. Only 62,000 locations, so there's not a lot there. It wasn't successful, clearly, but as you can see, there's a lot of points. And the point to take home is that they're utilizing the bay. They're not utilizing the nearshore oceanic habitat, they're utilizing the estuary, which is exactly what our thought was, is that these birds are here for a reason, and they're using Hempstead Bay especially to find food. And say what you want about water quality and nitrogen loading, but for whatever reason, Hempstead Bay is a very important spot for all sorts of marsh birds, water birds, et cetera. The dark red is all locations within 20 kilometers of the nesting colony, and which shows that 83% of all movements were actually within that 20-kilometer range. Less than 1% of the movements were, like I said, offshore, in nearshore habitat. So their strategy is to use the estuary. It's not to go out off. Terns will use the offshore. If you go out on a party boat, you see terns, you could be 5 miles out, and you're going to be seeing terns still. Skimmer, as you can tell, do not spend much time on the ocean. And again, this connects the importance of Hempstead Bay and its water quality or anything else as to why these birds are here and why they're continuing to nest here. We have some result. This is a cool slide because it actually shows how kind of the lab analysis part of this project can actually confirm or deny some of our field understanding. So on the right, those graphs are from our field observations of what we call a provision survey. So as these adult skimmer bring food back to their young in the colony, we have techs that are out there actually with binoculars just looking for adults bringing back food. And we're trying to identify what species or what size that prey item is, and did it actually get fed to a chick? So there's kind of like 3 layers there. It's like, what species is it, what size is it, and was it given to a chick? So these parameters allow us to understand at least anecdotally or in a light scientific way, of what's coming back to the colony. You're not gonna catch everything. You're not gonna fully understand it. But to understand kind of the top 5 items to confirm what we think we're seeing was very successful. And actually, when we looked at the diet characterization through stable isotopes, it showed that these same species were estuarine species. So it's, again, confirming that they're using the estuary to find these food sources. Most specifically, Atlantic silversides and striped killifish. That's, from our focal observations, that was the biggest 2 species that we would see. But we know anecdotally that needlefish and sand eels are some of the best prey items that they could have. But some of that is seasonal. We've seen years where we have a lot of those items, other years where we don't. So that's another end of our research, is like, is it one specific prey item more important than the others? I think the general thing here is that they're using the estuary. And species that are in the estuary are available to them, and they're going to capture them and use them back for their young. And it was just nice to see that the focal observations kind of add up with the lab observations, showing that the process we were doing out there, we had the right idea. And again, for other managers who are trying to understand species a little better, there's some focal surveys that you could do to kind of show a little more what's going on at your colony or your site. I only have 10 minutes, so I'll skip through a few of these, but skimmer home ranges was something we looked at. We wanted to look at the difference between male and female and kind of like nest attendance and how often they were doing their thing to rear their young, because obviously there's an incubation period and then there's a period of rearing the young, and you can't have both adults gone for too long. So this polygon kind of represents two different years in terms of like the whole home range that we saw. So where all those points went in 2 different years showed kind of a different home range between 2 different seasons. And that could be for a whole bunch of different reasons. It could have even been that one of these birds that we put a transmitter on abandoned the colony in 2022 and said, I'm going to go look at Jersey, or I'm going to go over here. So there is some of that kind of error in this, but this was more to spatially understand that their home ranges are within the bays and are commonly have a difference between male and female. It seems to be that females were not going as far and males were going a little further, either whether that's a search for food or that's a timing thing. It doesn't kind of represent those different phases in nesting. So there's still a little more work to be done on these. We're going to get into the migration and kind of how they use different strategies to come to and fro. And I think a lot of this helps connect kind of the whole Atlantic Flyway and why it's so important to have events like this where we could speak to other managers across the area. Yeah. This was a migration pattern of one skimmer, so SNA-23. It was a bird that had a transmitter, and we compared their spring migration to their autumn migration, both with dates and timing, but also speed and number of days. So fall migration versus spring migration, almost twice the amount of time to get back down to Florida, Georgia, Cuba, wherever they might be going for the winter time, as opposed to the spring where it's like a shotgun mission where we got to get back. So very interesting to see that. Even in our field data in terms of bandery sites from all across the Atlantic Flyway, we have field readable bands that anyone can report. And especially across Florida and Georgia, we get bandery sites all winter long. And what was interesting to see was how long it took some of these birds to show up in Florida. And we found out recently that a lot of them were going to North Carolina and North Georgia and stopping over places along their way. So that they left our colony in October, but they really weren't in Florida till December. And then, over the years, we've picked up enough data to understand that they are really meandering their way down. And you could see that an average migration of 75 days as opposed to 37 days on the way back. So just good food for thought there, which also helps us understand when to expect birds, when to expect them to leave, and same for the wintering sites, like when they should expect to see these birds. This is comparing 2 different individuals, both of which that migrated to Florida, and also identified different stopovers along the way. So North Carolina, like I mentioned, Tybee Island in Georgia, both really important stopovers, just not only these two birds, but multiple species, multiple transmitter species birds have ended up in these two specific locations. So again, they're meandering their way down. Maybe they're standing by at a few areas because there is still food there. So these are just some of the things that the telemetry data can show us and allow us to, you know, further our research, whether that's collaborating with others in the wintering zone or collaborating with others in our area. Repeat migrations were an interesting thing, showing that even the wintering site, they had strong fidelity too. And that we were seeing even before we did the transmitters. I've been getting emails from the same people every year. We are seeing your birds again in this exact beach, you know, with the same picture from the same year. So, you know, not only do they have strong site fidelity here in their nesting grounds, they have strong site fidelity back when they go to their wintering grounds, which creates a situation where, well, we kind of have an idea on where some of these birds are, so I can collaborate with others in Florida and Georgia, Cuba, et cetera. What's going on in your site in the wintertime? What sort of red tide issues, water quality issues are you having? Because that's a very strong problem in southern Florida right now. And you know, to have that information, to know that it wasn't a great winter here, there was a lot of disturbance, there was red tide, et cetera, might actually affect, you know, productivity in the summer season, whether it's through their migration or through whatever energy they have when it comes to nesting time. Fly forage behavior is kind of a term dubbed by Dr. Goodenough, in that they have a unique strategy in that they don't fatten up like a songbird does before they head south for the winter. They're not taking a full ride down to where they're going. Like I said, they're kind of meandering their way down, but they're not stopping for many days. They're just kind of stopping for several hours just to forage. So this is just a couple of quick examples where, you know, you're following its track down and all of a sudden it takes a, you know, 8-hour layover in some back bay, and you know, there's an indication that it's stopping to forage. So this fly forage technique is kind of a way to get the heck out of town as fast as they can once the food source swindles, but be able to, you know, hit spots along the way and stay fueled up for this long journey. So there's 128 specific episodes during autumn and spring where something like this occurred. The duration of those events varied from 4 to 8 hours. Highlights the importance for management and conservation in other habitats beyond our own. I missed a whole bunch of stuff today, but skimmer are really important to us at the town. They're a super unique species, something that many people today said that they were excited to hear about, and I invite any of you to come to our site this summer and see what's going on there. And I just want to thank all the folks, you know, from the state, the federal people, all of our awesome researchers and volunteers who have helped us with this project, and over 50 people over 5 years, 6 years have helped us with this project and get us where we want. And I think a lot of our strategies and attempts at research are translatable for a lot of different site managers up and down the flyway. And I think that's kind of our new goal, is to say, you can do this too. We had a very small nest egg, $30,000 to get transmitters, but the rest of it is just having good staff that's trained well, and you know, some collaboration with people who really know what's going on, so we can inform management and make decisions in our area. You know, I work for local government. It's important to me to be able to make these challenges known to the folks that make decisions day to day, so that we can make long-term change from a management standpoint to better these ecosystems as a whole. Because without that, all of our work is kind of fallen on deaf ears without someone working for us along the way. I think it's all of our jobs to be able to, you know, translate this information in a way that we could actually enact change, and I think we'd all agree to that and be supportive, and I think we'd all be very happy if that was reality as well. But we're trying, and that's our goal, and we continue to get there. And any questions I'll take, and thank you all for the time, and thank you.
Questions?
Thank God.
They'll get to the microphone.
They'll find me in the parking lot. I know how it works. Thank you.
Thanks, that was great. I so enjoy watching the skimmers. Were they here when I was young, which was like 60 years ago? Because I don't remember seeing them when I was young, and I certainly see them a lot more frequently now.
So we didn't have any at Lido until the early 2000s, but that first slide I showed of Gotchfield and Berger, you know, that's from 1990, and there were colonies all across the way. So there have been established colonies here for many, many, many years. The number of them has changed for many, many years. They're shifting as well. We're also seeing them in Connecticut and Massachusetts, which is kind of rare for them, but they have small populations that are moving in that direction as well.
So they could have been moving up in the 50s and 60s.
For sure.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Rob. I was just wondering, is it easier, do they feed in the bays because it's physically easier to do it there because of lower wave heights than the ocean? Or is it mostly what they're feeding on?
I think it's more the prey item that they're looking for. They are one of the most agile birds in the world. They can navigate through waves and all that, no problem. So I don't think it's like the rough surf that's preventing them. I think it's just the food source itself. I mean, you see the juveniles will practice foraging kind of right in the near shore, especially when it's calm, but they're very rarely bringing back food from that area. So I think it's just more fruitful to go in that. And also these are individuals that we tracked, so it's almost skewed to say, well, this guy did this. There might have been 10 skimmers with them when they went and did that. And that's something that we've noticed too, is they don't always kind of travel as an individual. They travel in these small groups and forage together. So there's some interaction going on there. And certainly the safety of the bay might be an appealing thing as well.
All right, thanks.
Thank you all.